3.
Three.
Where's my camera? There you go.
There it is. We're all working together.
Yes, time flies when we're having fun, right?
Right.
So today we're diving into unemployment, specifically unemployment for the W-2 worker and unemployment for the 1099 or independent contractor. So we have some info on that. But before we dive into that, Tim, I wanted to chat about PPP, EIDL loans, stimulus payments, which were our previous conversations. I had been in contact with somebody with Mark Amadei's office, which was very nice. And they had said, essentially, all of the funds have been exhausted, that they expect that Congress will re-up that. And then one of the interesting things that they said was, if you had applied for an EIDL loan before April 1st, that you may, that the SBA was informing them that you should just go and reapply. Are you hearing the same things, or what do you think?
I had not heard that at all. In the EIDL program, I know that your previous comment is exactly correct. The Senate approved an expansion of the EIDL loan program, the disaster loan program, on Tuesday. The House expected to vote on it today to expand that program by $60 billion. But I did not hear that you're supposed to resubmit your application. That is certainly not true for the PPP. If you've already applied at a financial institution, then they are treating those people as your spot in line. So if you go reapply somewhere else, the chances that you're going to be way further back in line are almost guaranteed. So those people who have applications in there at a financial institution, my recommendation is stay in line. The PPP program is supposed to be expanded by or refunded, I guess is a better term, expanded, whatever, by $320 billion. Earlier report said 310, earlier report said 250. So the language that's going to the House today is $320 billion, of which $30 billion is going to be set aside for the very smallest of lenders, community banks and rural financial institutions. There's an additional 30,000 that's going to be set aside for the next level up, the small banks, and then there's 250 billion that's available to all financial institutions. I've spoken to three different financial institutions here in Northern Nevada, and they all said that they're going to basically take the applications that they have now and send them first. So if you were recently applied, and you're using, they're all the same wiggle wording, no guarantee of funds, no guarantee to fundings, all of that kind of thing. But if you were on it last time and just missed it by a little bit, chances are pretty decent that you'll get in this time around.
So Tim, what is the, because I've been hearing a lot of different stories, and maybe help clarify this, is there's a lot of people that are saying, hey, there's these large corporations that got a big chunk of this money. Is there a certain allocation of this money to, like, you have less than 25 employees and you're in this range, and you have 25 to 100 employees and you're in this range? Are they trying to manage that? Because of course the big corporations who have all the people who have the time that this is all they do, as opposed to the little guy who is trying to keep things going.
Exactly correct. That would have been great to have that kind of stratification in there. The PPP was originally meant for small business. There was special carve-outs for Wall Street type things. This was supposed to be the Main Street funding. And there were over 75 public corporations that got funding. There was a little, I'll call it a loophole for our purposes today. But if your NICS code, your North American Industrial Classification Code, started with a 72, which put you in either the restaurant hospitality or into a franchise thing, the 500 employee count was by location, not in total. So if you're Ruth Chris, that's really a big thing, or Potbelly, which is a popular chain in, I believe, the Southeast. They're public corporations and have availability to sell more stock on the public market or access to capital in multiple different ways. they
Right.
qualified for this PPP because each location did not have more than 500 employees.
That's a fairly substantial loophole where they have those other types of ways to raise capital and to take advantage of this as well. Well,
So Lisa's next life is lobbyist.
there you go. That's
great at that.
not fair.
That's why they're really trying. There was proposals of changing the bill to be 50 employees or less, or 25 employees or less, or putting some type of revenue cap. You can't make X more than revenue in this latest refunding, but they wanted to do it with such expediency that they couldn't go back to the negotiating table. Instead, they basically passed an expansion of the exact same bill.
Yeah. And in all fairness, everything, because we're seeing this on the mortgage side as well, which we'll get to next week. In all fairness, this was such a quick turnaround in response to the emergency situation that we were all facing, that a lot of this type of stuff was not fully thought through because they didn't have time. It was more important to get the resources out. So, as we work through it, hopefully we will, and then following iterations and things can be fixed on the backside a little bit.
And Lisa, I think that's a great point, because that's what we're seeing with the stimulus and all the frustration that's going on with that too. Where's my $1,200 for the people that didn't get it? They were trying to shove it through so quickly and get money out to individual taxpayers' hands that there's bound to be problems. As we get into unemployment as well, we'll see that's exactly the situation that we have today's topic as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tim, to talk about the stimulus for a second, we've seen it kind of go across the country, and more people are getting it. One of the things that I read recently was if you filed your tax return with a TurboTax type company, that you may be receiving your stimulus later. Is that, as far as I could understand, that appeared to be true. Is that how you understand it?
So what happens is when you provide your direct deposit information to the Treasury, they send the money directly into your account. A lot of times, if you're using a TurboTax or one of the other, organizations like that, they will load it onto a prepaid debit card. And instead, so they basically have a, Intuit bank or a TurboTax bank where they put it into an account in your name, but it's really not an account. And then they put that money onto your debit card. Well, those accounts are only around for the time period that they need to get that money in and out, and then those accounts are closed out. But that's the account that the Treasury now has. So if they try and load that money into that direct deposit account, that account no longer exists. And so TurboTax and some of these larger, online tax preparation companies, that kind of thing, are trying to work with the Treasury and say, no, don't send all of those millions or billions of dollars to accounts that no longer exist. We'll get you the real account information.
So I have to imagine that the Treasury already began to do so, and it was getting kicked back, or it was sitting in accounts that people, you get that debit card, you spend the money, you throw it away. Do you have any clue of how they're working this through?
Your friends at the Treasury say they are working on it, and they'll do it as fast as they possibly can.
My friends, yes, my
yes, your personal friends, Jared. You had them for dinner last week, didn't you?
Yeah, he's connected with Amity's office. We didn't know what kind of, maybe Steve is, having beers with him on a regular basis.
My good uncle Amity. Yeah, yes. Actually, I was very surprised to hear from them, and they were very helpful. So I'll give a nice shout out to that office for going the extra mile when they didn't have to. So if we're diving into unemployment now and where unemployment stands, let's say I am, or I'm somebody out there who's had a hard time getting into the unemployment system, or maybe I had something on my account where I couldn't file it online, so I'm trying to call in. What are some of the numbers that we're seeing as far as people in Nevada who have signed up for unemployment?
So Nevada unemployment, of course, is overwhelmed. We haven't seen this kind of numbers ever. Even in our 2007, 2008 timeframe. It was real interesting when I was pulling statistics in preparation for this meeting. The Nevada UI said the next highest claim was like late 2008, and it was about a third of the numbers that we're seeing now. So as of April 11th, of course, today's the 23rd, so we're a couple weeks behind as they, amalgamate that data. But as of the 11th, we had over $330,000 claims since the beginning of this year, and continuing claims. So people who are still clicking and clicking each week and saying, I still am on unemployment, are just over 189,000 claims. So if you can imagine, that's 3 times the highest number they've ever had previously. Then that's 189,000 people each week that have to log onto the system, click into their claim, say, I'm still here, make sure that you send me my money, all of that kind of thing. And just last week, they saw an increase of about 56,000 claims. So they're still coming in.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're frustrated by trying to log on to the system, or if you're frustrated in trying to get a body, that's why 189,000 divided by 7 days a week, whatever it is still a large number.
And I know that the state has, originally they had doubled the amount of people working in unemployment, and now they're up to tripling the amount, or they're at, I think around 300 people working in unemployment.
Yeah.
Just to process these claims as quickly as they can. Now, it's very clear if you're a W-2 employee and you were laid off because of COVID, that you do qualify. Good luck maybe getting through the system. What if we have a question in the chat? What if I'm a single LLC business owner? How are they handling that?
So state of Nevada has always gone off of your wages for processing unemployment, W-2 wages. If you don't have any W-2 wages and the measurement period is the previous 4 calendar quarters, they say that you're not eligible for benefits. So along comes the C.A.R.E.S Act, which is why we're all talking today. On March 27th, the feds said we have so many people that are self-employed, so many people in the 1099 world or the gig economy that are self-employed. We want to be able to provide relief, unemployment, to those people as well. So they provided for up to $600 per week on a federal program that people would be able to be compensated. So the answer to the Facebook question, do I qualify if I'm a single member LLC, is yes. Now here's the problem. We have a software system at the state that was, written in the 1980s. It was never designed to cover self-employment people. And they're doing a great job, a yeoman's job. I don't mean to discount their efforts at all, but the system was just never designed to accommodate self-employed people. Like, for example, if you're a W-2 person, Jared, and you've been working for the same employer for the last 12 months, and now all of a sudden you get laid off, your employer has been reporting your name, address, social security, and the amount of wages that you've been earning. So let's take our Facebook user that posted the question. How do they know how much to pay him or her? So there is no reporting to the state on how much self-employment earnings are. And so is it just a flat 600? So the Nevada UI is trying to work with the feds and say, how do we process this claim so that the Fed money covers it? And oh, by the way, we, the state of Nevada, don't have to bear the brunt of that by, paying somebody out and not having to, have done it correctly. So they're trying to figure out all that. They shut down about a week and a half ago to do some programming updates. They're getting ready. But really the how, the why, the how we can do it is the holdup right now. Governor Sisolak indicated that they will go back as far as March 15th and retroactively pay those benefits for people that weren't unable to get through the system. So right now the recommendation is self-employed people should file a claim, and in one of those early boxes as you're going through the online system, you mark the little self-employment box, and then basically you're sitting out there. So you kind of said, hey, it's like the PPP program. Hey, I'm in line. I'm here. I'm ready. As soon as you figure out a process to pay me, then pay me. And then you should get up to that $600 per week. And again, retroactively as far back as March 15th, once they figure it out.
Well, and I don't know if this is good advice or not. However, this is an experience that a friend of mine went through. They are self-employed business owner and couldn't apply for unemployment, or there wasn't really a system in place to do so, but they were out of business because they were a non-essential business. They went through the EIDL loan process with the SBA. They applied for a loan, and they were actually approved for that loan this week. So that could be an option. That could be an option for that person who is a single LLC business owner.
And there's going to be another 60 billion available theoretically tomorrow.
Yeah, theoretically, yeah. But now 60 billion, 60 with a B, that will go really fast, because we had how much in the PPP program and how much in the EIDL program? Way more than that, and it went in, I think the number was like 13 days.
13 days. So yes, so there was 349 billion in the original PPP loan program. If you calculate that out over the time period, it's about 25 billion a day that went, and it was gone in less than 2 weeks, like you said, Jared. So tomorrow, presuming that the House approves it today, and they're expected to, and President Trump signs it today, which he's expected to, there'll be an additional $320 billion. I betcha you can, mark my words, say you heard it here first, whatever. That 320 billion will be gone inside a week.
Yeah, no problem.
And I would imagine that most states across the country, because this is a Facebook Live event, so we may have people watching from outside our actual area. Most states, if you're self-employed, you don't qualify for unemployment in any state across the country. And so this whole thing is new for everybody. And I would imagine every state's unemployment systems are struggling with the same thing, where you may not get the employment from the state, but you could potentially qualify for the $600 a week from the federal government once they understand how they can actually access that money. Is that kind of okay?
And we've only dealt with employers in Nevada and California, sure. But you're absolutely correct. Nevada and California are having similar problems.
Yeah.
So let's say I want to go and apply. What is the easiest, best way for me to do that?
The 200 internal and 100 external people who are working to process claims say you will get much better results if you apply online. There's a great link at the Nevada UI site. So you go to the main page. There's a tab above that says for claimants, or for people who are seeking unemployment. So you click on that tab and you basically create an account. You go on, you create an account. It drops you into screens. So if you're filing an initial claim, electronic is the way to go. Make sure that when you create your account, you write down your username and password, because you're going to have to get into that weekly until circumstances change and you're re-employed in whatever you are. They have stratified to make filing claims a little easier. So they have stratified certain days for based on last name. So A to K, if you're filing, you're set aside for A to K is Sunday. If your last name is L to R, then your day is Monday. If your last name begins with a S to a Z, it's Tuesday. Those are supposed to be reserved for only those last names. And then every day, the rest of the time is available for anybody that can do it. They tell you that it is important that you get it right the first time, because if you go down a little rabbit hole and your claim is held up, you have to talk to somebody. So they tell you, grab that, read the instructions first, especially as a man. Sorry for our gender. I'm not great about reading instructions, but there are two guides, one for the claimant guide for online filing. That's about 49 pages. And then unemployment insurance facts, and Nevada unemployment insurance facts for claimants booklet, which is about 40 pages. So read through those, be sure you understand it before you even start to file your claim, because if you can get through the first time, you avoid yourself a lot of hassle. If you get, like I said, down one of these little rabbit holes, then you end up having to call in, and the call volume is just unbelievably difficult. So.
Right. We have a great question about if you're a 1099 employee. I mean, are you considered an employee if you're a 1099? You're a 1099 independent contractor, or so let's say I am a 1099 employee or independent contractor. Should I go through and file every week, even if it's not super clear what the state is doing, or should I wait until they figure that out?
No, so if you log on, you should file a claim again, click the box at the very start that says I'm self-employed. So if you're 1099, they call them 1099 workers because they are not employees. So 1099 workers or 1099 independent contractors, you're in the self-employed column. So mark the little box at the top says self-employed. Go in each week and say, my claim is still active. I'm still here. And then when they finally get around to working out the bugs, then they'll go back for each year that you have said, I'm still here.
And retroactively pay you. Mitchell Ross said, my PPP loan was approved last Thursday. Funds have been set aside. I still haven't heard from the lender.
That's fantastic. So the normal process was you go through your financial institution, they say you're approved. Then they say, okay, we submitted it to the SBA, and the SBA actually will send back loan documents because all in all, until it's forgiven, it's really a loan. So if you've got loan documents back, then you said, all right, I really got the money. So SBA set aside money for your loan. You sign the loan documents, and then you should see the funding in a very short period. Most people are seeing between 24 and 48 hours after they finally submit all the signed loan documents after that. So if Lendio, which is the Facebook comment, whatever it is, you haven't heard from them, my question to him or her back would be, have you actually signed the SBA loan documents and submitted it back to Lendio and like hit the tennis ball back onto their side of the court? And if that's true, it should be pretty quick. If it's not, they're probably waiting on something from you.
You know, this is such a great example of why relationships matter. And if you, I think it's Heritage Bank that says it's not how big you are, it's how big you are with your bank.
Yeah, that tagline's a great line.
Yeah, we have a relationship with our local bank. It's not one of the bigs, so it's not a Wells Fargo or Bank of America. And they were so amazing at getting us through the entire process. And we funded, actually, our PPP funded this week. They just made it so easy. And I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday and said, this is such a great testimonial of why it matters to have a relationship with everybody at all times. Who knew in a million years that we would need something? That my relationship with the teller or the branch manager would ever matter. It really came through. So I think this is a really great time for people to reevaluate their relationships with their banks and get into relationship with them.
Well, business relationships across the board, right, Jared?
Yes.
We found Tim. He's a local CPA here. He's not something online. He has this knowledge base. This is a great opportunity to understand why it's so vitally important to have these types of relationships with professionals in your area.
Yeah. I'm probably violating some marketing thing, but if you can see, where's my camera? See the best CPAs ever. Well, then you kind of turn it around, and so there you go.
There you go. Hey, it's our show. You can plug whatever you want. We're in charge. It's okay.
But that's exactly it. The local lenders seem to get their people, at least even if you weren't getting through, at least you know where in the process you were. Some of the banks I've been talking with, they've been working, 12 and 18 hours a day for the last 3 weeks trying to process as many applications as they can get through, that kind of thing. So, it's very, very important to be, Northern Nevada, Reno is a very small community. They say there's 500,000 people, whatever, live in here, and it seems like you're running the same 6,000 again and again and again. And so knowing those people and being nice is critical.
Yeah. Matters. Somebody said the challenge for small businesses is we do not have a legal team whose job it is to understand the legally language to submit a loan. Time is everything in this case and may not be on the small business side, but we'll keep trying for sure. Any advice for the small business owner who is struggling through this process?
So if you're just starting the process, definitely try and complete it. Your friend, Jared, Chuck Schumer said, this is not the last train leaving the station as it relates to stimulus, as it relates to economic impact. But my opinion is, if you are not already applied, if your bank has already said that their application is not approved, at least at your financial institution, then probably you'll miss this 320 billion round as well. But certainly get your application completed, get all those little loose ends, those hairs off of it, get everything submitted. And that kind of thing. If you have been accepted and you're just waiting in line, even though you haven't heard anything, you've pretty much done all that you can do at this point. My guess is, I don't know exactly how the SBA opens up the gates, but at 8 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow, 5 a.m., something like that, there are going to be thousands of financial institutions clicking the send button. And I don't know what that process looks like, but it's going to be this mad dash Black Friday before Christmas rush towards PPP loans.
Yeah. So expect that you may be sitting in line. You may continue to sit in line.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
So if we're going back to the conversation around unemployment and unemployment benefits, the federal government is giving an additional $600 per week, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And they are doing that. So if I'm able to apply for unemployment and get approved, I'm receiving that through the state of Nevada. They're processing it and getting it to me.
Any states, that's correct. But yeah, for purposes of today, the state of Nevada. So the feds are sending money down to the state level and then letting the administrative functions of each state process their unemployment. So on March 7th, when the CARES Act was signed into law, it provided for FPUC, so Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation. So that provides up to $600 on top of what you would have gotten as a W-2 employee from the state, and or for those self-employed and gig workers. The CARES Act said that they would start paying you, or you would be available to be paid under the FPUC as of April 4th. And you could be paid all the way up through July 25th, which I think is a 16-week period, maybe, something along those lines. It can be for partial pay. So let's say that you were working 40 hours a week, and because your employer is not necessarily closed down, but requires you less, and you're only getting paid for 20 hours, you can do that for the 20 hours that you're not working. So that's $600 a week for this time period. And we'll see again if that gets extended at all. But right now, now through July 25th is the theoretically open period.
I have a question in regards to, it might be getting too granular, but we have so many people, or have seen in the last 12 months, so many people coming into the state just because of the economic growth of Nevada. And so you mentioned that they look at the last 4 quarters as to what's actually been reported. So let's say you have a situation where someone has spent the last, 2 quarters ago in California, and now the last 2 quarters are here in Nevada. Does that add a layer of calculation joy to the whole thing? Because now Nevada has to talk to California to try to kind of get what that is. Because I know Nevada doesn't pay nearly as much as California does on a weekly unemployment basis, which doesn't pay as much as Washington does.
Yep.
So
they are recommending that if you have worked in multiple states, that you go to the state where you worked the most, so that you have a higher compensation base in that quarter period, and you apply in that state. So in your scenario, where let's presume your work and your wages were exactly equal, 50% to Nevada and 50% to California, the pro tip would be apply in California if the wages, or if the UI compensation was going to be greater in the state of California.
So basically, where you've made the most income, the state that you've made the most income in the last 12 months should be the state that you actually go to apply.
That's my understanding. And different from what you said, there is no provision, I believe, for Nevada to reach out to California and say, hey, give me your data.
So okay, got it. Okay.
So now, let's say I get through this process and I'm receiving my unemployment benefits. This was a question that I got about how do I report this on my 2020 taxes? And so let's say I selected the option for taxes to be taken out, federal taxes to be taken out.
Good.
Am I going to receive some type of W-2 from the state? And then also on Lisa's side, is this income that you can count if I'm trying to, let's say in 3 months, this is all back to normal, I'm back to my job as normal. Can you include my unemployment benefit as income?
Lisa, you want to handle that first, and then I'll tell you about the tax side of things?
Sure. So from the standpoint of unemployment income is generally not something that's considered in the past as income that you can use for underwriting, simply because it's a temporary stopgap in most cases. Of course, things are not normal. An example of that would be I have a seasonal firefighter who works 8 months out of the year and claims 5 months out of the year of unemployment, and he's been doing it for 5 years. I can actually use that unemployment income and add it to his overall income because I have consistency, I have a pattern, it makes sense. In this particular situation, it's we haven't gotten to that point yet where we're actually trying to, people have gone back to work and we've got this gap. If I'm going off of just based off of guidelines, what they're going to want to see is stable income. So they're not necessarily, I would think, and I would fight this with an underwriter, but again, of course, we don't know exactly how guidelines or guidance is going to change when we get to that point in this process where people are now back to work. I would say that in that particular case, a letter from the employer stating that they were furloughed due to COVID-19 will allow us to basically kind of pick up this time period of unemployment and remove it from their average of their income qualification. And basically say this was a one-time, and so that letter from the employer really needs to state they were furloughed because of the pandemic. They are now back to work, working 40 hours a week. They are working at the same rate of pay, which is really, really important in regards to those letters from these employers. And as a result, I personally would calculate the income and submit that with kind of like taking this 3-month chunk out of their world. And so I've got 9 months, we're in September. I would actually take what you've made the first 3 months and the last 3 months and do a 6-month average and basically with a letter kind of go from that standpoint. What lenders really are going to want to see is income stability. If you're doing an FHA loan and this goes longer than we anticipate, FHA says if you haven't been working for 6 months, you have to be back on the job for 6 months to have your income be considered stable. So I don't know if they're going to come out and say, hey, this is a unique situation and we can override this particular rule. So there's a lot of next steps that we just don't know yet. But that's how I would approach it at this point in time. Of course, that's how I would approach it. That doesn't mean that anyone's going to listen.
Everybody listens to you, Lisa.
Oh, well.
Everybody.
Get down to government and see if that can work.
Right. I'll just call my friends at the Treasury and Chuck Schumer and Amade. We're all very tight. On the
we got it in.
on the tax side of it, what does this look like come by 2020 income taxes?
All unemployment compensation is considered taxable income. It will go on your 2020 tax return, and presuming they don't substantially change the forms, it will go on a Schedule 1, line 7, which is an unemployment compensation, and roll forward into your regular 1040 form and be considered just like wage income, interest, dividends, be considered 100% taxable to you, and then added into your adjusted gross income. So just like anything, plan on that being taxable income to you for this year, because I've seen a lot of people that were hit with unfortunate circumstances go for unemployment insurance for a long time, get to the end of the year, and then get hosed again by the tax man to say, hey, now you owe tax on our money that we gave you to help you through this difficult time.
Right. What about Social Security? Am I paying into Social Security if I have unemployment?
No. and not considered earned income either for purposes of, like you said, Medicare or anything like that.
Got it. Mitchell Ross says, what is the best way to keep records to have the PPP loan forgiven? I'm a sole proprietor and haven't been doing owner draws in the past. So you had said that the SBA will send you loan docs because it is considered a loan, but it can be forgiven. Is that written in the law, or are we just hoping that happens? And then what is forgiven, and how do we track that?
So back to PPP, if you spend at least 75% on payroll or related costs, and then the other 25% can be spent on rent, mortgage, interest only of your business operation, and utilities of your business operation, and again, during that 8-week period from the date that your money gets dropped into your account, then it can be forgiven. The reporting would go back to your bank. They would verify it all and then report back to the SBA that loan should be forgiven. In his specific context, his specific question is, he's a sole proprietor. And so he would actually have to have a self-employment statement, usually a profit and loss, that would say, hey, I made X amount in revenue, I have X amount in expenses, whatever drops to the bottom line. So that sole proprietor, his self-employment income. So if he has, quote, payroll, which in this case is his self-employment income, then it could be qualified for forgiveness as well. So he would have to then keep really good records, unlike some of my clients who say, I'm going to hurry up and do all of my 2019 bookkeeping so that I can get ready for my 2019 tax preparation in March of 2020. My recommendation would
that never happens, Tim.
It's all in the shoebox.
Yes.
But the bank is not going to accept the shoebox. And so he's got to keep a really good summary. And I don't care if it's by Excel, if it really is on, 4-column paper and he's adding stuff up. At the end of the day, he's got to be able to provide something to the financial institution that says, here's my claim for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. This conversation is so interesting to me because for so many people who are small business owners or real estate agents or sole proprietors, we may not be so good at keeping track of all of this, right? And who knew it would take a worldwide pandemic for probably some of you out there who are watching to go, oh, wow, like keeping a P&L is really important, and putting myself on a payroll is really important, and setting these things aside so that if this were ever to happen again, I can imagine that for the people who are already doing that this has been a much easier process than for the people who, like you said, are waiting in March 2020 to file, to get all of their records reconciled from the previous year and file their tax return. That just can't be easy.
Two-part response, Jared. On behalf of the 90 to 95 realtor clients that we have, on behalf of them, they take the fifth. They're not going to respond about their record keeping, that kind of thing. Second part of the answer is we had a client yesterday who is a sole proprietor, so not single member LLC, not S corporation, that kind of thing, sole proprietor, that said yesterday, I would like to apply for the PPP. Please give me a P&L for 2019. And my response was, give me the numbers for 2019 and I'll happy to give you a P&L. And so, we are magic, but we can't create what happened for you last year.
So you don't just put those numbers in there? And
I can give you any P&L you want, Jared. You just got
I want a really big P&L that would get me more money. So just give me the biggest one and make it the greatest.
Now, the follow-up class to all of this, when this is all said and done and we can actually meet, there'll be a class at Tim's office in the evening on how to actually keep your books and how to actually keep a P&L.
I'll bring the wine.
There you go.
Yes. You're right. I need the class of how to pay quarterly. I need that class.
Yeah.
Not that it's really a class. It's 5 minutes. Here's your check. Go. Right.
It's more like how to set aside those funds. So
that's the key.
There we go. Yeah, that would be a great class.
Yeah.
So I bet, the unemployment thing, this is the first time we've ever seen unemployment be made available to self-employment people. And it's a wonderful, wonderful resource. And like the Donner Party, the first person that was going through that chest-high snow has to break through all of that snow. And so all of you who are unemployed and are seeking those unemployment benefits, you're the first person through chest-high snow. You're really defining how future years, future crises, and unemployment for self-employed people will be handled in the state of Nevada.
Yeah.
And hopefully at the end of this, we don't end up eating each other.
Yes.
At the Donner Party. I had to get that in there.
I was going to say, you really had to go there, huh, Jared?
If you're going to use the Donner Party as an example, I have to throw that in there, right? It's just history. So we've talked about if you're unemployed and you're a 1099 worker, you can still apply. You may not see your money right away, but the governor says that they will do some retroactive. Once they figure it out, they'll go back to March 16th, if I'm understanding it. As long as you've been applying for that long, you'll see money in your account. If you're a W-2 employee, it's a fairly easy process if you go online. However, if you have a blip or if they don't get you approved right away, you may see some difficulties in calling in.
Yeah, so some of that, for example, we had a client who was filing for unemployment and got their claim denied. It turned out that their social security number that they put in their unemployment insurance claim was 1 digit off from what their employer had been sending in the wages under. And so when they went to file, the unemployment office says, you've got no wages under your social security number.
Right.
But then again, that throws them into the holy hell that they have to call in and get a live person to say, all right, let's look into this. Tell me what your employer was. Give me the ID number, all of that kind of stuff.
So good. That's a good lesson in checking to make sure that it's listed correctly. So I get my money. I'm getting a portion from the state of Nevada. What is that, by the way? Is that 60% of my wages, 75% of my wages?
The guide says it can be up to 2/3 of your wages. And I think it's a maximum of $469 per week.
Okay.
And then the $600 on top of that is leading a lot of the smaller businesses and that kind of thing have struggles with their employees because it's almost kind of an add-on. So if I get the $469 from the state, which is the cap, I add the $600, I'm getting $1,069. It could actually be more than what I was making full time. I've had some of my employer clients call and say, my people are begging me to put them on unemployment or don't want to come back because they're earning more than they are on unemployment than they would be if they were working 40 hours a week.
Yeah, that's true. My mother-in-law has worked for the El Dorado for 20 years and was furloughed, of course, because they had to close down. And yeah, she's doing incredible with this unemployment. She got a raise.
Tell her to withhold taxes.
Oh yeah. Oh yes, we are. Yes, we are. Yeah.
So in regards to that, from that standpoint, how does this, when this is all said and done, how does this impact the state and the state's unemployment fund? Because I also saw some rhetoric starting to be talked about in regards to the fact that this is not, the federal government is not going to float everybody forever. They can't, that hopefully we can get this resolved and taken care of. At what point in time does the state now have to kind of foot the bill completely on their own? And looking down the road, 1 to 2 years down the road, how is this going to now impact that these business owners who are paying into the state's fund? How do you anticipate or project that we're going to be able to build that back up so that then we can just kind of go back to what would be normal of 4% unemployment that we've had and stuff like that?
Yeah, so the state of Nevada ran into this problem when we had our last crisis, 2006, 7, 8, even 2009, where we kind of ran out of money in the unemployment insurance fund and we're borrowing money from the federal government. So all those unemployment claims got paid, but then at the end of it all, the state of Nevada had to repay the federal government. And they assessed an additional surcharge to all employers for a period, I think it was 5 years, maybe 6 years, to kind of special assessment going back to repay those loans. And then as soon as they were repaid, then it went away. There was the latest press release from Dieter dated April 10th, if any of you actually want to go look at it, has some nice click-throughs. And so it actually says what the status of the unemployment insurance fund. We got about $1.5 billion in the state unemployment fund. Last week, it went down by 48 million as they paid out claims of about 48 million. So we got some runtime, even at the state level before they're really in trouble to, drain the unemployment insurance claim or fund rather. But certainly we don't want it to continue for a super long period of time.
Yeah.
If in fact we don't see the second wave of coronavirus or that kind of thing that they're seeing, or we don't see it in a large way, that kind of June 30th or even mid-July timeframe seems like it will be more than enough to cover our current crisis. The other thing that the state is trying to figure out from the feds is for these $600 payments that are coming down from the feds, will that really remain at the federal level, meaning that Nevada doesn't have to pay that back? Or is there going to be some kind of reconciliation or comeuppance that says, okay, Nevada and all these other states, we want our money back now to repay the federal coffers?
Mm-hmm. Well, at the end of the day, it's this consumer. I know we're experiencing that on some of the mortgage stuff on the secondary market and what's going on with secondary and buying and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, everything is going to end up trickles down to what those interest rates are available to the consumer.
Yeah. Look for new taxes in 2021. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it would be foolish not to think that if you are paying into unemployment as an employer, that there's not some type of special assessment that will be coming your way.
Yeah.
Well, they already have a provision. So let's take my own operation for a while. So as a new employer, you start out paying an unemployment rate of 3% of wages up to a maximum of $32,500 in for each person. So anybody that goes over 32, I have to only pay 32% or $32,000 at 3%. Then as my experience rating goes down, my employees don't file for unemployment. I can get below 1% on paying my unemployment insurance rates in that. As soon as employees start claiming, then my rate goes back up and will be capped at a 3%. So yes, for all those people that are, have laid their employees off, their rates will be going back up to that 3%. Yeah. But then on top of that, my crystal ball says there will be an additional assessment that says, now here's all the stuff that we have to kind of replenish the coffer.
What if you had an employee who left you and you weren't their most recent employee or employer? They filed for unemployment and you received that letter in the mail from Dieter saying one of your employees filed for unemployment. What does that affect you and your rate, or are they what? How does that work?
It depends on why they left. If they quit, they theoretically are not eligible for unemployment. If you furloughed them, if you laid them off, or if they left you because you were being a real jerk and they can prove that, then they're eligible for unemployment. They look back, Nevada looks back over that 4 previous quarters, and then they allocate the employment benefits against your experience rating based on the wages that you paid them versus any prior employer paid them. So let's say you hired this person for a week and then they had to be laid off to, because of coronavirus or whatever purpose your business was non-essential and shut down. And they worked for somebody else for that entire year before the week that they went, you would get kind of your experience rating would get whacked 1/52nd for that period.
Got it.
We have interesting situations now with, I spoke to a client this morning where his company is requiring him to take a week of vacation every month using his vacation time. And then if that does continue, then they're going to encourage everyone to take a week of furlough so that then everybody can still be working, type of thing, kind of spreading the pain out to everybody as opposed to, just having one person or 2 people get laid off. in that type of particular situation, we discussed from an underwriting standpoint. I basically told them, I said, I'm going to have to go with your lowest calculated income based on you taking a week of every single month of no income. But from the standpoint of the unemployment, it's kind of a weird situation because you're not working and you're working. And is that where that falls under that? Like, I'm working 20 hours a week and I can then get paid out the 20 hours. It's just structured a little bit differently.
Yeah, and it's even worse than that because if that employer is requiring the employees to use their vacation, that's regular wages, except for depleting their
vacation time. Yeah.
Things like that. If they actually furlough them for the 1 week every month, that kind of thing, then they're eligible for unemployment and they can use that money to replace that without impacting their vacation. So it sounds like kind of the employees are getting a raw deal by requiring the.
Well, I kind of had that discussion with him a little bit too, because I was like, no, that doesn't sound like, no one can tell you have to do this. So, but yeah, so he's working on that aspect of it. Don't worry, I gave him some ammunition. But I was just curious to know because that was one of his specific questions. He says, if I file for unemployment, is that going to hurt my ability to go ahead and get a loan at this point in time? Because he's in an active transaction right now.
Yeah, I mean, Lisa, you would be the best to answer that. But from the standpoint that, you would disallow that unemployment and include his regular wages, seems like that's the boat he's going to be in. But if he is using his vacation or PTO or is covered under one of the like FFCRA, where they're required to provide sick leave for coronavirus impact or family leave for coronavirus impact up to those 80 hours, those would all be considered, in my opinion, regular wages. Right.
Oh, so they're required to pay them 80 the number of hours based under Corona.
So right before the C.A.R.E.S Act, there was a Families First Coronavirus Response Act, the FFCRA, that said employers who are under 500 employees have to provide for up to 80 hours of sick leave for people who are impacted by the COVID-19, the coronavirus. And then there's also a family medical leave. So the FMLA, which normally doesn't apply to people under 500 employees, now became effective, and you have to provide up to 80 hours of paid leave. They can use their vacation, and then additional 10 weeks of job protected but unpaid time,
right?
For all that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, you're talking only 80 hours, only 2 weeks, but they should be able to get a payroll tax credit of 100% of those wages on their second quarter payroll tax reports, if in fact the employer pays the employee's wages for allowing them to care for parents or kids or impacted by COVID, or if they themselves are diagnosed positive and have to stay home for a quarantine or anything like that.
Got it. Okay, good to know.
And this is why I tell you, I never passed the Society for Human Resources, the SHRM organization's tests. So nice little disclaimer there.
It just seems to me like there's so many nuances and there's so many opportunities. Let me ask you this question. Let's say that we have so many realtors on, you have applied for the PPP, you have applied for the EIDL, and you also can apply for unemployment. So you can utilize all three resources or do they start canceling each other out?
Yep. So like the PPP documents say, I have got no other benefits under the C.A.R.E.S Act. The EIDL loan is supposed to have documents to say, so you're not supposed to double, triple, quadruple dip.
Got it.
There's other things that we are not intending to talk about and have not talked about, by like the employer retention credit. What if I keep on paying my employees? There's actually a payroll tax credit for keeping them around. So there's a number of things that are out there that are not supposed to be overlapping, but for which employers and small employee organizations can take advantage of.
So you've been a wealth of knowledge, Tim. I mean, I personally have loved like having these conversations because I'm just like, I have all these family members. I'm just jotting down the notes and because I'm passing the information on to make sure that everybody's taken care of as much as possible.
That's exactly wrong. You're supposed to tell them, come back and watch this.
Oh, okay. Well, I like that better. That's what I'm going to do. There we go. That's perfect. That way I don't have to take notes. But to that point, if people have additional questions, things like that, can you share with us your contact information? Because I know you and your team are in the office, you're in the trenches, you're keeping things moving. You are a great resource. How best for more specific questions for each situation, how best to get in touch with you?
So first of all, look back to our prior week's thing, because it was all in that recorded thing as well. Thank you, Jared, for being master of all things technology. They can, and Jared, if you'll put that on the Facebook post. So my telephone number is 775-825-6008. That's the main office line. We are closed to the public, but certainly doing all the Zoom and remote distance calls and that kind of thing. Email is tnelson@encpas.com. So Edward Nancy CPAs.com. And of course our website encpas.com as well. But yeah, we're answering questions like that for people day in and day out these days. There's so many questions, and it's going to continue, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Lisa, what are we talking about next week?
Oh, we're talking next week about mortgages and forbearance and forgiveness and student loans and how you can, with your student loans, a lot of great stuff going on in regards to allowing, timelines. A lot of people are on these forgiveness type of student loans. You have to put in a certain amount of time. And some of the nuances that they've created. I was able to get on a couple webinars to learn a little bit more about that, because that's not my area of expertise. And right now, from what I've heard, it's applying just to your federal student loans. But I'll give you the information that we can send that link out to people if they can listen to the student loan webinar as well, which helps direct them as to where to go and how to determine what kind of student loan you have. Because private loans are currently not included in this. So you have to be very careful of what kind of student loan you have. And then of course, the forbearance question and how is that impacting on the front end? Because there's really two sides to the mortgage world. You have the front side where it's, interacting with underwriting guidelines. And then you have the back side, which is a secondary market and how all that's playing into everything, and how this was the unintended consequence on the back end is really driving the front end issues and rates and things like that. So they're kind of interrelated in a kind of a great big huge jumble right now that we're trying to work through with Congress.
Yeah, and if I get forbearance, does that affect my credit score, my credit report? Am I still paying interest for that month? I know that these are all things that we'll cover next week, and I'm already full of questions. So
good. Well, good. I'm hopefully I'm full of all of your answers. So yes, I think probably the most important thing I can tell people right now is forbearance is not forgiveness.
Yes.
It is very, very important that you are very aware of what it is that if you need the forbearance, that's there for you as a safety net. But it is not forgiveness. The documents that they're sending you to sign, I've talked to people where they've taken them to their attorneys, and the attorneys say, you don't want to sign this because now they have control over your house. I mean, there's a lot of things. So it's your best bet is to see what you can do to try to make sure that you get that mortgage payment made. But of course it is there as it's a very important resource. So I'm super excited to share that with everybody. And then I also do have a beautiful one-page infographic, which basically kind of can show us on a kind of a timeline, they call it a waterfall. It's this, if this is what you need to do, then this is the next step. And then these are the consequences of that. So again, 7 days of legislation. It took them 7 days to create this legislation. The last major economic recovery legislation we got was in 2009. It took them 7 months to create that. And that still had problems. So, slamming something together in 7 days, we've got some unintended consequences of this, but we're trying to work through it and take care of everybody at the same time of making sure that we're keeping things stable.
So we will be talking about that next Thursday, April 30th, right here, 1 o'clock. In the meantime, thank you for joining us. Thank you all for your questions. We appreciate it. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds great.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.